All right, so we're going to be talking about quarterbacks and running backs and how we're going to play them going into next season, but we always get started off with a trade. Scott, 12-team Superflex PPR 1.75 for the tight end start 10. Are you going Bryce Young in the 104 or Bo Nix and Drake London? Go ahead, man.
2 for 2. Got the quarterbacks comparing Bryce to Bo Nix. It's Bo Nix pretty comfortably. Not just he's got probably a little better perception just because there's really not been anything negative about him unless you thought he was terrible coming out. You haven't changed your preconceived notions. And the fact that he's probably got a lot more upside than Bryce Young. So it's really Drake London in the 104. What can I do with the 104? I think in a lot of leagues, it's going to take a first, maybe not the 104, plus Bryce Young to get Bo Nix. So the fact that I'm also getting Drake London, I think I'm taking the Knicks Drake London side pretty comfortably. Now, if your league is really heavy on running backs, then the 104 is going to be a prime pick to probably be in position to get one, which may be more desirable than Drake London. But a lot of leagues, I think people are probably pretty indifferent between London and a mid-first. And so give me Bo Nix over Bryce Young pretty easy. I'll take the Knicks London side. I think I could do more with that, even though there's some flexibility with the pick.
Shane, 12-team Superflex PPR 1.75 for the tight end start 10. Are you going Bryce Young in the 104 or Bo Nix in London?
Man, this one's not easy for me, right? Because I'm always trying to figure out the delta between two pieces, and the delta between Bryce Young and Bo Nix, is that wider than it is between the 104 and Drake London? I don't know. I legitimately don't know. I think I'll lean the 104 and Bryce Young, mostly because Bo Nix is 47 years old and has 2 more years until he retires. I'm kidding. I do lean the 104 more just because it is, we're getting to that season where I want flexibility, where I don't have to just make the pick. I can do other things with the pick. Of course, the saying's put 2 birds in your hand and none in your mouth or whatever. So maybe Bo Nix and Drake London would be the better way to go because you at least know what you have. Like Bo Nix looks like he'll be a top 12 quarterback. Low end. And Drake London has wide receiver 1 upside, but more likely high end wide receiver 2 upside, right? I mean, that's good production, but I'm still going to go with Bryce Young in the pick, I think. Just the flexibility that the pick affords me.
So we're recording this December 30th, so a lot's going to change. But Scott, as of today, how do you think you're going to approach the QB position first when it comes to startups or 2025 in general?
It's one of those things where do we want to overreact to what happened in 2024, or do we want to kind of zoom out and say, maybe I'm going to play it differently than what the market's going to do? Because the market's going to overreact to the results from this year. Joe Burrow is going to be QB3, QB4. He shouldn't be that high. There's going to be other quarterbacks that people are going to bury, like Dak Prescott or Trevor Lawrence. Like, those guys aren't any good, but they could be right back in the top 15, top 12, top 10 even next year. So like the thought that we're just going to follow this year's results, have biased against the guys that maybe didn't perform as well, were injured, lost some weapons. We're just going to run that back again. And there's always going to be somebody overvalued, undervalued. I think what's better to probably look at is if you're going to build your quarterback room a certain way. So if you're in a startup draft and you're committing to taking an early quarterback, how are you going to play the rest of your quarterback room? Like probably if you just look at not just last year, but the last 5 years, you can probably find that middle ground where you say, okay, given that I can probably replace some quarterback production pretty cheap, do I really want to invest in somebody that I think has some quote unquote like job security to where I have to pay that floor price to say, man, I got to pay the quarterback 17 price for Tua. And that could be in place of at least another productive starter, if not 2 of them. And really what I'm getting is what? QB 15 to 20. And maybe I feel okay about him lasting another year or 2, but then is that even a guarantee? And if all I'm getting is QB 17 production, why pay anything for that? Because I probably, if I'm willing to take a little risk, I can probably find that cheaper. I can find that literally off the scrap heap, and it turns into the next Sam Darnold or the next Baker Mayfield. And that could be Daniel Jones. That could be Jameis Winston. Like there's a lot of candidates where I'm not shooting for top 5, top 8 ceiling. I'm just trying to get a placeholder QB2. So I think if I'm really going into how I'm building my quarterback rooms this year, especially if I get top 4, top 5, I think it's probably Daniels, Lamar, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. And then you start getting into, I think Burrow, Herbert, Mahomes are the next 3 for me, where I'm like, even if those guys have a bad year, they're not going to absolutely kill me. And so I'm okay taking them. But even if I have those in my QB1, do I really want to just play the let's go completely punting my QB2 and just kind of try to stream it? Well, if you can successfully do that, though, if you hit one of these QBs that's 20 plus points per game, like we're talking standard, you can get away with just finding quarterback production and not taking it in a startup and getting an extra, think of the Aaron Joneses, the James Connors. That could be like 2 or 3 of those guys in a startup where it's just like, I'm just chasing pure production. And we've seen the Dynasty game, like those guys have more value than they ever have before when we're in the midst of point scoring season. So I think I'm leaning into it. I'm not going to pay just for quote unquote safety, because we've seen a lot of safe QBs over the years, Shane, that you feel safe that you're going to get a year or more from them. Halfway through the season, you're going, this guy's not even going to last through the season, let alone another year. So it feels like you really want to kind of fade that overpriced, like low-end QB1, high-end QB2, because that's where a lot of the dynasty value is going to live. That's where your Caleb Williams is going to probably live. And you're like, what upside does you really have? Even if he has a good season, how high is it actually going to be? So you probably want to fade that if it's at the higher end of the tier and really just play it gross, especially if you get a top 5, top 6 quarterback.
Shane, if you could pick your spot in the first round right now, where you're going to select from, what are you picking?
I'm going to go with the 107, Bob. I do want to go as late as possible, so let's just talk through it right now in no particular order, right? There's Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels. Am I forgetting someone?
Burrow?
No. Because again, no disrespect to Burrow, but we saw CJ Stroud is what can happen to a pocket passer in a bad year. Joe Burrow and Herbert have had years where they're pocket passers, and they've shown you what it is when they don't smash. They absolutely smash. You know what I mean? It's great that Burrow went out there and threw 40 touchdowns this year, but that's what he needed to do to be a top 5 quarterback. So say next year he just goes out there and throws 32, which is a very good year. He's not a top 5 quarterback. Burrow's not any less good. So if I go 101, right, I get the 212 and then the 301, because I'm assuming that it's reverse, whatever that is. Third round reversal. I still think I'm going 107, because then I'm going to get my choice of one of those quarterbacks or Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, or Malik Neighbors. I can live with that. And, depending on what I do there, it might dictate what I do in the second round, although I have a feeling no matter what in the second round, I'll probably be going wide receiver anyway. So this team could end up being a team where I do punt the quarterback position and just go, all right, Baker Mayfield, where's he going to get drafted? Can you see Baker Mayfield getting drafted in the second round next year? Even if he deserves it based off his stats, I don't think that's going to happen. So I might be in a position where I can get Baker in the third, or if I need to, maybe I trade up in the late second and get Baker. So all that to say, I don't know how I got there, but probably the 107-ish.
So Scott, then your quarterback room, how would you craft it? If you could pick, 3, 4 quarterbacks, what does it look like?
I mean, I think if you can get one of the ones that you think is pretty likely to hit that 20 plus points per game, I do think you can chase the lowest common denominator at QB2, meaning I don't have to take the guy that I feel really safe about. I don't have to chase the Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, Kyler Murray, Brock Purdy, Bo Nix, Caleb Williams, Drake May. I just named a bunch, and there's more that I didn't name that you would say, I'm fine with all of those guys as my QB2. But you know what? Every one of those guys, throw Dak in there, throw T-Law, throw Baker in there, throw Stroud in there. All of those guys are going to be gone in a Superflex draft in the top 30 picks. Mm-hmm. So if I get Lamar Jackson, my QB2 can be some mixture.
What about Geno?
He's going to probably fall just a little bit. But the point is, if he falls to QB 25, I'm willing to take that because I'm going to be able to get it cheaper. Right. And I'm willing to then go, okay, my QB 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I'll just take chances on. And here's why I'm even reticent to take Geno Smith, because you know what? If I just hit on a random Aiden O'Connell or Will Levis or one of those guys that even falls way further because people aren't sure how much they're going to play, if I just have a bunch of those guys with my Lamar or with my Josh Allen, I just need to find somebody playing in a given week, because they're most likely going to match the likes of a Geno Smith or whoever you might insert in there, Derek Carr. They're going to match that guy. It's not going to be that big of a gap. I'm just not going to feel like I have much of an asset if I'm rolling out there Mac Jones, Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell. They're not assets. Yeah. But can I collect all of those guys outside of the top 15 rounds of the startup? If so, kind of feels like I just want to continue to take skill players. I mean, we've seen a year where all of a sudden the random Terry McLaurin's being traded for a first. Not every league, but that type of player with the new age dynasty managers, if there's a player during the season that is a wide receiver 1 or a running back 1, those were getting moved for decent prices.
Sure.
What wasn't getting moved was Geno Smith. Because everybody was like, yeah, why would I trade for the quarterback 20, Geno Smith, when I have Cooper Rush and he's starting for the next 6 weeks? Like there's just, it wasn't the market. And I think chasing the market is probably how I'm going to consider doing it versus chasing the quarterback names. And just have to be uncomfortable with the fact that my QB2 is never going to be like locked and loaded for 3 years. It's not going to be Jordan Love signed through 2028. It's just not going to feel that good. Every year I'm going to have this scramble to probably have to commit a lot of roster spots to QB. But I think that's the way to play it if you can pick your draft slot.
That was going to be my question, though. If you're going to roll with a gross QB strategy like that, are you more likely to keep your pick for the following year?
Not necessarily, because you know what? This strategy lends to me basically trying to hack my way there with a bunch of backups over years. So sure, if I'm in a spot with my pick where I can draft a second quarterback, fine. But the point of having Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson is I don't really ever need a second. I need to have somebody in that space, but I don't need to like draft a replacement eventually. It isn't a punt for a year so then I can blow the 104 on the next Bryce Young. That's not the point of it. The point is my pick remains flexible, but it doesn't make me less likely to trade.
Shane, what about you? Give me 3-4 quarterbacks. What does a beautiful Shane Manila quarterback room look like?
One of those top 4 is the hope, right? Even that's not a prerequisite to me, right? It depends on how I get there. Again, if it's a derby, I have more control over it, assuming I'm in a position where I get to make the pick. But let's just assume it is a derby and I get the 111 because that's what I'm left with. I'm not going to go out of my way to overpay to move up to get Josh Allen just so I have one of those elite quarterbacks. And maybe I will just build my wide receiver room, my team through the wide receivers that are going to be more likely to get me closer to 20 points per game than the quarterbacks in that range. Because Scott listed them off. I think there was only, off the top of my head, I think there was only 3 or 4 quarterbacks that hit that range this year. And next year, obviously, it could be different. So perfect world, I would have to say it's one of those top 4. And then I don't care. Like, you know what I mean? It's literally, it's Geno Smith, Jared Goff, Matt Stafford, Aiden O'Connell, and just looking at my finals teams, which probably colors the bias, gives me a little bias. That's how most of those teams were built. And I don't know if it purposely was that way, but it worked itself out that way, where there's like one really, really strong QB, and then the second QB is kind of meh, and then the wide receivers are generally, or the running backs in some cases, are generally really strong. So I don't feel the need to overpay for a second quarterback when the second quarterback's not going to be elite. I think we might overshot what we thought the elite tier was a couple of years ago, and a couple of those quarterbacks just didn't take steps forward, and we see that the elite tier is minuscule. Small. It's small.
I think the term elite, where things got blurred is we actually started considering dynasty value in quarterback production, and we blended the two together. Shane mentioned Matt Stafford. The last 3 years, Matt Stafford has averaged quarterback 25. He's at 13 points per game. I can find that with any dog shit quarterback I throw in. If Tyrod Taylor starts, I bet he outscores 13. So I don't even want the Matt Stafford. I don't want to use a startup pick on a quarterback that I can get.
You're going to get Matt Stafford in the 13th round.
No. I don't even want to spend a 13th round.
Sure.
I want my QB2.
Don't even spend any picks. Spend one.
No. It's a construction thing. I draft Josh Allen. My last 12 picks are all quarterbacks. And all I'm banking is that I land on one starter.
Round.
No.
It's an easy queue.
It's the 13th round.
Every pick, I want to basically get a starting quarterback less than a third rounder. So I don't even want to spend, and I'll just bank that I can go replace it as I need week to week. Now, this is an uncomfortable way to build. So I get where Shane is coming from. If a quarterback falls and it's quarterback 29 and I can take him, then fine. But I think planning to just go, well, I'll take a quarterback in round 10 instead of round 4 because it feels cheaper there's still probably a player in round 10 that if they're producing during the season, somebody may pay a first for that. You're actually limiting your upside in favor of some safety by drafting the Matt Stafford or the Geno Smith.
Not if you're getting them in the 14th
market.
round. I'm not fucking talking about in the first 10 rounds. That's like to act like I'm a fucking moron. Like, oh, I'm spending a 4th round pick on Matt Stafford. I'm not fucking slow. I mean, I'm a little slow. I know my accent makes it sound that way, but I promise you I'm not. I mean, like, I'm probably going to take those guys late. I think I'm trying to express the same point, just picking a player that's probably not making the point well.
Lowest common denominator of the starter. Shane,
right.
Where Shane and I are different is Shane will go, okay, QB 34 is on the board. That guy's actually starting. I'll take him. Where Scott is saying is, I'll wait until there's 45 off the board and just gamble. And I hit on every...
So stressful.
Yeah. Well, Snoop Huntley's going to get 3 starts. But here's the thing. So the way, I mean, partly the roster construction and the asset allocation. If you build your team right, and obviously you have to hit on players, which is, not a guarantee, but if you build your team right and you do hit on the wide receivers and they're giving you 40 points per game, you can live with your QB2 giving you 13 points a game, 10 points a game, and then hopefully a spike week will, like, you randomly have a Snoop Huntley going off for 27 points, sitting on everybody's bench. But yeah, I get Scott's point. But yeah, I'm not going to wait till QB 45. I will wait until, we get to the Aiden O'Connells of the world, which I put Matt Stafford in that range at this point. If he plays next year, I'm probably at that point going to go, all right, I need to add a QB to this room now.
I think the other thing that drives me to this, and I mean, this goes into the discussion of how we're playing these positions. Like, I'll give you an example, Clay. Who would have been easier to buy this year? Geno Smith straight up or Jordan Addison straight up?
Probably Addison.
Mid-season, who could I have bought cheaper? It feels like the one that's easier to buy this year was probably the team that goes, hey, I can get by without Geno Smith because I also have like Mason Rudolph on my bench or someone like that. Versus when somebody feels like they have a kind of replacement level quarterback that's really only being valued a little bit of a premium because they're a locked-in starter, the market's flipped to where those guys are easier to get now. What's harder to get is the somewhat young and not smashing, but producing player that is locked into one of your flexes or locked into one of your receiver or running back spots every week. It feels like the market flipped, where if you were willing to go pay market price for a just QB2, not a guy that has top 10 ceiling or not somebody that's 26 years old, you could have gotten those guys. And so I feel like you can always go and find that if you go gross at QB2 in the startup. You just have to get it addressed by week 1. I don't need a locked and loaded starter in June. I need it on September 9th when the first game is. And that may be a Gardner Minshew started to open the year last year. That could be a guy I buy at the end of training camp when he wins the job, and it doesn't cost me even a second to get him. That's not that different than Matt Stafford. So I just feel like early in the season I can gamble a little bit. And Shane, Baker Mayfield, 21.5 points per game. Would you put him in the Burrow, he's a pocket passer, or is he a little...
No, he's
he can move a little bit. He's got like 300 plus rushing yards.
His game opens up, and he's a lot better when he's not trying to just stay back there. When he's like, you know what, I might run a little bit. He's better that way. I don't know, like that. I don't want to talk real football because I'm not an expert, but it just seems to me like that's when that dude wakes up, is when he starts taking off or scrambling a little bit. Like, he enjoys getting popped. He's a weirdo. I'm not paying for what he did this year, just like I'm not going to pay for what Burrow did this year, just like I wasn't going to pay what you had to pay to get CJ Stroud for last year.
One more question for Shane. Just humor me with the startup. Let's say you're picking at the end of the startup, like the example that you gave, right?
Round 30.
Well, just no, the end of the first round of the startup. You're getting stuck at the back part of the first round. At what point do you just say, I'm not taking a quarterback at all? Punting. And then where do you feel like there's the squeeze? If you pass and you go, let's say you go Amon-Ra St. Brown, Bijan Robinson, something like that, right? Now you don't pick again until the 3rd and 4th. You're kind of giving value back if you go, damn, I'm squeezed at quarterback. Let me draft Tua in the 3rd.
Yeah.
You just continue to push it, and then all of a sudden your QB 1 and 2 are Matt Stafford and Geno Smith. You feel good about that, or what?
So I had a startup where I tried to nut up and like just punt quarterback, and I made it to the 3rd round. I think I traded into the 3rd round after making a 3rd round pick, and I moved up to get Kirk Cousins. So you know what? If the quarterback ain't worth picking there, I'm not picking them. It makes no sense to use that pick on a quarterback that doesn't belong there just because they're a quarterback.
And we've learned over the years that the quarterbacks that like kind of get panic picked in that range are almost never worth drafting.
It never works out.
I better go get this guy at QB 15. Otherwise, they're all going to be gone when I pick. But it's like, okay, so I just picked Dak Prescott over a player clearly worth more than him as soon as I have them on the team. Nobody would switch them around, but I took it because quarterbacks are
just to make you feel better too.
I'd say it's legitimate after the first 4, and I feel like I'm missing someone for some reason. I don't know why, but let's just say those first 4. I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that you go Chase, Jefferson, Malik Neighbors, forgetting wide receiver,
Puka Nacua, Amon-Ra, Brian Thomas,
maybe.
You're saying these guys over Mahomes?
I mean, here's the thing, Clay. Somebody in there is going to go, you know what? I'll just take Mahomes. I'll just take Burrow. I'll just take Justin Herbert. Like somebody's going to take QB.
And understand, it's not that these are bad quarterbacks, right? These are quarterbacks. Even Mahomes were in that range of 16 to 19 points, as opposed to the wide receiver there. That it's going to be like the gap between that wide receiver and the next tier of wide receiver is going to be further than the quarterback to quarterback there. At least that's based off this year and pretty much every year for the last 30 years of my life.
You know how many games Mahomes has over 21 points in the last 26 regular season games? He's done it a total of 5 times.
Yeah, I will say this though, but at least 4 of those had to come out of 5. At least 4 of those had to come in the last half of this season because he did light it up the end.
He turned it around.
He has 4 in the last 10 weeks of this season.
Yeah.
But if you just look at the last 2 seasons combined, I mean, it's probably fair to say he is in that low-end QB1 range. Like, that's where he is, and that's no slight on him. It's just, where do you want to take that kind of player in a startup, Clay, when I could tell you it's very, very confidently he probably finishes somewhere between QB 5 and QB 10. Feels good, but do you really want to pay QB 5 for the name Patrick Mahomes? You know what I mean? You probably don't. You'd rather be the team that drafts Dak Prescott at QB 17 and go, well, he could probably outscore Mahomes. In fact, he's done it like 3 times already, you know?
Right. And that's the problem, right? I'm paying QB 5 prices for a guy that, again, not specific to Mahomes, Herbert, Burrow, whoever.
But somebody's got to be picked at QB 5, Shane. You're just saying that's a range you don't want to play. I'm taking someone at QB 5 that could give me a QB 13 season, and vice versa. Kills you.
I could take the 13th QB off the board, and he give me a QB 5 season. And I don't mean this like I took Baker at QB 20. That always happens. I mean, like, it's in the probable realm of possibility.